Hello and welcome. This is Lucas with Yoga Body and the Yoga Teachers College. Today's class is called Food and Flexibility, Understanding Bendy-Bodied Nutrition. Our agenda for today, we'll start off talking about yoga nutrition unveiled. We'll help you determine your eating objective. What are you eating for anyway? What's your goal? We'll talk about foods that help and foods that harm, supplements that could be of help along your journey, and then takeaway action steps. Let's jump right in. Is yoga nutrition a thing? Is it even a real thing we should be discussing? Let's look at other movement modalities to get some context. Bodybuilders will eat 2, 4, 5, 8 times as much protein as normal people. In order to have abnormal muscle size, you have to eat abnormal amounts of protein. Every bodybuilder knows this. It's just a reality. That is how bodybuilders eat. High protein. Ultra distance runners, Ironman competitors, racers, they eat 2 to 8 times as many carbs as normal people do because they need to fuel for these long events. Climbers and backpackers will often eat super high fat because it's the most calorie dense food by weight that they can carry. So if they're going to put, a kilo of food in their bag, if they have lots and lots of fat, that's going to be more efficient in terms of nutrition. Yoga students have traditionally eaten vegetarian, but this is not an eating plan. It's a don't eat plan. It's not actually a nutrition plan. It's just the way that people have eaten. It's not necessarily right for you. We'll talk about why. So what are you eating for? What are you optimizing for? The most common mistake is that people model their diet after someone with different goals than them. The most common one is people will try to eat like a bodybuilder they see on social media, or they try to eat like an ultra marathon Ironman racer whose podcast they listen to. If you're not doing the activity in the sport that they're doing, you're not going to get the results that they're getting. So if you are eating to get as much muscle mass as possible, that's a bodybuilder. If you're eating for the ability to run for 20 hours straight, well, those are ultra runners. The ability to stay as lean as possible, but strong enough for jumps that are required for ballet, well, that's a dancer. If you're trying to live as long as possible, that's the human longevity, the biohacker movement. Ask yourself, what are you eating for? And what does your lifestyle really look like? Because you should not be eating like an Olympic swimmer if you're a cubicle jockey. That's not what you should be doing. If you eat like an ultramarathon runner, but you live the life of an office worker, it's not going to make you fast and lean. It just won't work. You need to eat for your lifestyle and eat for your particular objectives. What do yoga students want? Well, most people want flexibility. That means healthy, elastic, youthful muscles and connective tissues. That would be tendons and ligaments and fascia. We want strength, functional power in a huge range of muscles. So not just big biceps, but we'd like to be able to do upward facing dog and stand on our head, maybe stand on our hands, do back bends. Very complex functional strength. Balance. This means nervous system balance, your electrical system, and endocrine system, your hormone system, your chemical system in your body for mental focus and control. It's a big part of yoga that's not necessarily part of other movement modalities. For example, a lot of ultra elite athletes have very big hormone imbalances. Almost all bodybuilders have massive hormonal imbalances. They are not looking for balance. They're looking for size in the case of bodybuilders, or speed and endurance in the case of runners. As yoga students, we're typically trying to find balance of our nervous system and our hormonal system, and it's important to note that there's a specific way to eat to do that. We also want lean bodies. What does this mean? Well, if we have excess weight, it just gets in the way while practicing. Extra weight just makes poses more challenging. It's not ideal, right? If you look at the body type of a football player, if you look at the body type of an ultramarathoner, of a swimmer, they have a very specific body type. And for yoga, it's very helpful to have a lean body. It makes poses easier. Just that. It's not about taking great photos or any kind of aesthetic. It's just a reality. It makes poses easier. So why vegetarian is not the answer. It could be an answer for you, but it's not the answer. This is where people get confused. Remember, vegetarianism is a belief system. It's a food religion. It's not a nutrition plan. So saying you're vegetarian just says what you don't eat. It doesn't tell us what you do eat. So can vegetarians be healthy and balanced and fit and flexible? Of course they can. Can vegetarians be unhealthy, imbalanced, stiff, and weak? Yes, of course they can. Lots of them. Belief systems are personal. What we want to focus on here is nutritional principles that are universal, because your choices and your students' choices are personal, and they're also changing with time. It's not something we want to make generalizations or assumptions about. Let's take a look at the first of our goals, flexibility. All of us want to feel more flexible in our joints, in our tissues. We want to feel limber and youthful. So what's helpful? Water-dense foods is a big one. For many years, I would teach juice fasting programs where we just drink juice for 3 or 5 or 7 days. And by the second day, everyone was saying how flexible they felt. And they thought it was the vitamins going to their muscles, but really it's just because they had so much water in their system. All of our tissues, of course, need hydration, and just eating more water, not just drinking, but actually eating suspended water in plant foods particularly, is really, really helpful for flexibility. It sounds obvious, but it really isn't that obvious when people fall into the trap of eating lots of processed foods, which are dry and dehydrated. The next is magnesium-rich foods. Magnesium is an extremely abundant mineral, and it's very easy to get if you eat lots of green vegetables, if you eat lots of nuts and seeds, if you eat lots of super dark chocolate, like 85% plus. Most people don't eat enough. They just don't. It's one of the most common nutritional deficiencies is magnesium. It's an incredibly important mineral for all kinds of functions in the body. As yoga students, the one we focus on, it's not the only one important one, but the one we focus on is the muscle relaxation effects of magnesium. Helps to move your bowels, helps you to fall asleep, and helps to relax your muscles. Really, really great to have magnesium. So magnesium-rich foods are really, really helpful. Kale and spinach and chard, all the cruciferous dark green leafy vegetables all have magnesium. Magnesium and chlorophyll go hand in hand. So the greener they are, the more magnesium they have. Plus you have nuts and seeds, and dark chocolate are great sources as well. The next are sulfur-rich foods. Sulfur, we come back to our cruciferous family again, things like broccoli and cauliflower. Sulfur is really, really important for the health of your connective tissues, and a lot of us are lacking this. Sulfur was previously very rich in a lot of our freshwater supplies and of course in our plant foods, but our soils are depleted, our waters are pretty much free of sulfur, and so it's something that you need to focus on to get enough of. The next is anti-inflammatory foods, things that reduce inflammation in our body, because so many things we do in our life are inflammatory. Stress is inflammatory, processed foods, sugar is inflammatory, all kinds of things that we do. Lots of yoga is inflammatory. Anti-inflammatory foods, probably the king, are omega-3 fats, but also things like ginger and things like turmeric and things like pineapple can be anti-inflammatory as well. Harmful things, well, for flexibility, caffeine, and what caffeine will do is dehydrate you. It's the opposite of water-dense food. So when I say caffeine, it's all about the dose, right? And so your average coffee drinker is drinking over 300 milligrams of caffeine per day. And so one very small cup of coffee will have about 100 milligrams. A cup of tea will generally have 25 to 50, depending on the tea and the brew. And so as long as your caffeine consumption is very, very low, it's not a problem. But again, your average coffee drinker is drinking way too much. It's going to lead to slight dehydration. That's going to make you feel stiff in your joints and in your tissues. High starch and high sugar diet, that's because it's inflammatory, and inflamed joints just don't bend as well. Wheat and dairy are both very, very inflammatory. And again, when our tissues and our joints are inflamed, low-grade systemic internal inflammation, think of it like a mosquito bite on your kneecap or something like that inside on the inside on your connective tissues, it just makes it more difficult for everything to articulate. Processed foods are dehydrating. Processed foods can also be very inflammatory, which again is not great for our joint and our mobility. And then excess protein. So some people go overboard, and you'll have yoga students eating the protein quantities of a bodybuilder. Meanwhile, they're doing a 60 or 90-minute vinyasa class. You don't need that much protein, and too much protein can put a tax on your body, can dehydrate you, and make you feel stiff as well. Remember, what are your objectives? What are you eating for? We talked about flexibility. Now let's talk about strength. What kind of foods help with strength? Well, minimum of 0.5 gram of clean protein per pound of ideal body weight per day. So if you want to weigh 150 pounds, 0.5 gram, 75 grams minimum of clean protein per day. Really, really simple. Just take your ideal body weight, cut it in half. That's how much the baseline protein you want to have. I find that most people come in just slightly under this minimum, and it can help to get up to this minimum. And for some people, you might need as much as 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, but that's pretty high protein consumption for most people. You can play around with it. But some people, maybe they need 75 grams a day and they're at 55. Just going from 55 to 75 for some people can make a big, big difference in their ability to build strength. And you'll notice it in poses like inversions, in half push-up, in downward facing dog, poses where you would normally, where they require some brute strength. You'll notice it if you're missing that minimum viable protein dose. Clean protein we define as lean factory meats or fatty organic and wild meats. This is a complicated one, so let me unpack it. Take a look down at your body right now and think of all the petrochemical toxins in your home. Things like formaldehyde coming out of your wood floor, things like bisphenol A, we have plastics and all kinds of weird chemical, fire retardants, cleaning supplies, pesticides, all of these things, when they get into your body, where they go, in your thighs, in your bum, in your belly fat, your body stores toxins in body fat, as do other animals. Now, when your body can, of course, it eliminates them. But when we get too much, your body sequesters them in body fat because it's a safe place to hide them out. It's like when your relatives come over, you hide all the junk in the closet, you close the closet, all good for now, but someday you have to open the closet. With meat, it's exactly the same. So if you're eating factory meats, whether it's pork or beef or chicken or lamb or whatever you're eating, if it's a factory meat, a conventionally raised meat, the leanest meat is the best because you want to cut off that fat because there's a lot of endocrine disrupting, hormone disrupting toxins in that fat. If you're eating wild meats or organic meats, the fat is gold and you should eat that. Low starch vegetable protein. So if you're a vegetarian or a plant-based person, or you just like to eat plant-based proteins, which I think a lot of people do, low starch options are the best. If you're eating lots and lots of bagels, for example, bagels, a bagel might have 12 grams of protein, but it comes with 60 or 80 grams of carbs. So not a good way to go because all that sugar, all that starch is going to offset the protein you're getting. With all of your clean proteins, it means minimal processing and minimal cooking, right? Deep fried organic chicken breast is not a clean protein, right? We want to have minimal processing, minimal cooking. And again, if you're eating factory meats, which a lot of people end up doing, let's just be honest, a lot of people in the world eat lean factory meats. It's difficult to find high quality protein all the time. You want to eat lean factory meats. If you're eating wild organic stuff, that fat is the best, most nutritious part of it. So that's what you would want to make sure to include. Antioxidant-rich plant foods, they'll help with faster recovery. So just eating lots of vegetables, as we'll talk about time and time again, anytime we talk about anything in nutrition. So pro tip, food doesn't make you strong and flexible, but it can provide you with the building blocks needed to support that change. You still have to practice. People get the idea that they buy a tub of protein powder and suddenly they're going to start building big traps or big pecs. It's not how it works, right? The food is just the building blocks. You still have to practice. But without the building blocks, it is very, very difficult. And surprisingly, adding some correct building blocks can make a big, big change. Let's jump in and talk about our next topic, which is balance, right? We talked about flexibility, strength, balance. We have two different types of balance, nervous system and our hormone system. Let's talk about our nervous system first. This is our body's electrical system, our neural wiring, our firing of our muscles, our cognitive abilities. What's helpful? Well, B12 is extremely helpful, and it's a very common deficiency, especially among vegetarians. So I know a lot of you listening are vegetarians or plant-based, or you lean in that direction. B12 is a water-soluble vitamin. It's extremely inexpensive, easy to supplement. I'd recommend that you take it. And even for non-vegetarians, it's a very common deficiency because you need something in your gut called intrinsic factor to digest B12, to absorb it. Some of us are lacking in digestive health. It's something to consider. You can get a very simple B12 test at your doctor, which I'd recommend all of you do, by the way. And you can see if you're deficient or not. Most people can benefit from some supplementation. Omega-3 fats are great for your nervous system. They're anti-inflammatory. Inflammation can be systemic and can get into your nervous system, can affect your nervous system. Omega-3 fats are another thing we'll come back to again and again and again. If you look at the history of human population, we almost always lived around bodies of water. It's very unclear what people ate 10,000 years ago, but it's very likely that we were eating stuff coming out of the water, whether it was small fish or whether it was algae or whether it was bivalves with like mussels. All of these are very, very rich in omega-3 fats. That's probably why we have evolved to not be able to make them ourselves. Our body can make all kinds of fats, but it can't make omega-3s, probably because they were so abundant in nature, we did not need to evolve to be able to make them ourselves. Low sugar is really good. High sugar is death to your nervous system. Literally, if you have too much sugar in your diet over an extended period of time, it causes nerve damage, renal failure, you can lose a limb, all kinds of things. Low caffeine. So too much caffeine revs up your nervous system. It gets you stuck in a beta brainwave state. It gets you stuck in your sympathetic nervous system. You're unable to cycle between your sympathetic and parasympathetic. So low caffeine, low sugar, omega-3 fats, B12, B complex vitamins helpful for your nervous system. Harmful stuff, well, caffeine. We keep coming back to this again and again. But if you're having over 100 milligrams a day, again, most coffee drinkers are at about 350 milligrams a day. It's just too much. You're going to get stuck in a beta brainwave state. You're very likely to lead to food cravings, which are going to get you into high starch and high sugar, which we've just mentioned are not good. And you just want to make sure to throttle that caffeine if at all possible. It's sort of like when I see yoga students drinking a bunch of coffee before class, it's kind of like tying weights to your feet before you dive in the pool to do some laps. You can do it. There's some benefits to it, but it's much easier and much more logical to take off the weights, to cut down or eliminate the caffeine. And then other nervous system stuff, food toxins. A lot of people don't realize there are these excitotoxins like MSG, aspartame, other additives and chemicals in foods. Again, another reason to avoid processed foods because they can be terrible for your nervous system. Let's talk about balance in the context of your endocrine system, your hormone system. Well, what's helpful? If we're trying to balance our hormones, and in our case, what we're talking about here specifically are things like leptin and insulin and ghrelin, which you'll remember from our yoga body diet class. And then there are sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen. Human growth hormone. One of the most helpful things for that is a daily fast, which means a break between dinner and breakfast. I'll say that again, just a break between dinner and breakfast. 16 hours is kind of the ideal fast, but realistically 12 hours is still very beneficial. 14 hours is awesome. So a 12 to 16 hour fast daily is one of the best ways you can increase your body's hormonal balance. You will become more insulin sensitive, more leptin sensitive. You will often boost your testosterone if that's necessary for your health. You will almost always boost your human growth hormone, which is the hormone of youth, which helps you to build muscle and helps for so many different things. So that 12 to 16 hour daily fast is essential. Omega-3 fats are great for your hormones as well. We talked about those in terms of your nervous system. Vitamin D is actually a hormone. It's not a vitamin. And we are almost all lacking it because we don't get enough time in the sun. If you don't believe me, just go get your blood tested. 9 out of 10 of you are vitamin D deficient. It's pandemic. It's all over the world. It's a huge problem. We live indoors. We wear lots of clothes. It's not a huge mystery why we're vitamin D deficient. You can't just step outside for a few minutes. We are designed to live outside. It doesn't work anymore. It's one of these supplements that you probably just need to take. A low toxin diet can be really helpful for balancing your hormone system, your hormonal system. There's a lot of endocrine disruptors, hormonal disruptors in processed foods and packaged foods. So what are harmful things? Well, constant eating is no good for your hormones. I mean, if you're a snacker, if you eat a little here, eat a little there, even if your weight's under control, that's not good for your hormones. High starch, high sugar, those are going to lead to leptin and insulin resistance, which are signs of prediabetes, which will eventually lead to diabetes. It's very predictable. Food toxins would be things like plastics and chemicals and other things that xenoestrogens, other things that have showed up in your food products and packaged food products that can interrupt or make your hormones go out of whack. And then medications, the birth control pill would be the obvious one, but other things, even psychiatric drugs, antidepressants and things like that can have hormonal impacts you want to be careful of. Great, we've talked about balance, we've talked about strength, flexibility. Now let's talk about lean body. So why do we want a lean body? Well, it's not for aesthetic purposes. It's not to look good on social media. It's because when there's less of you there, it's just easier to get into yoga poses. So what are the best ways to lean out? Now, notice I didn't say thin. I said lean because some people are naturally going to be very, very muscular. That's fine. That's great. But we don't want to carry around tons and tons of extra body fat. That's going to cause problems in our practice and also just a lot of other problems in terms of long-term health. Best way to lean out, to change your body composition is, again, we come back to this 8+16 eating schedule. 12 to 16 hour fast is great. Again, 16 is the ideal, but 12 is a good starting spot. 14 is a great period, and 16 is optimal. We want to reduce our carbs down to a maximum of 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So if you want to weigh 150 pounds, you try to max out at 150 grams of carbs per day. We want to increase your protein to a minimum of 0.5 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So if you want to weigh 150 pounds, again, we're at about 75 grams of protein per day as a minimum. You could eat more. And lots of healthy, unrefined, or minimally processed fats, nuts and seeds and avocados and cold-pressed olive oil and coconut oil. All of these things are really, really wonderful, and you can eat them in abundance. The lean body plan here very much mimics our yoga body diet plan, so you could refer back to that. It's an eating style designed for body composition. Lots of lean muscle, low body fat. Personal consideration. So all these things I've said are really, really great, but what if you're broke? Or what if you're wealthy? Well, that's going to change things. You can buy different types of foods. These are real concerns that people don't talk about enough. If you're at a time in your life when money is an issue, you're going to have to rethink things, and you're going to have to plan and do the best that you can do. Healthy food is expensive. It's always been expensive. It will always be expensive. Healthy food is the best food. The best of anything is not the cheapest of anything. The cheapest is the worst. That's why fast food is so inexpensive. It goes down every single year because that's the worst food on the planet. You might also be concerned with animal welfare or ethics of animal treatment. Many people are. Environmental concerns. Maybe you're worried about what's going to happen to our planet here when we get 9 billion people here shortly. You might have geographic considerations. What's available in your area? You might love avocados, but you just can't get them. Figure out what's geospecific to your area that you can make use of. And then cultural considerations. I talk to many students who say, listen, all this stuff is great, but on Christmas I'm eating my grandmother's chocolate cake, or I just don't feel like a human. Go for it, or some people say, I wouldn't want to live without my red wine. Okay, that's fine. Just figure out what works for you. Everybody's got to make these personal choices on their own. One of the biggest things I want you to do is avoid the traditional yoga diet. That's rice, beans, bread, dairy, coffee. If you go to yoga ashrams, if you go to any of the yoga hubs in India or even in other parts of the world, they'll pretty much be feeding you rice, beans, bread, dairy, and coffee. It's just no good for yoga students. This triple starch routine, in this case, we have rice, we have bread, and then we have beans, 3 sources of strong starch, is a recipe for disaster. It's a meal where you're eating a day's worth of carbohydrates in one sitting. And the countries that do this the most are India, where, of course, we have rice, beans, and bread. And then we have Mexico, where, again, you have rice, beans, and then either corn or flour tortillas, rice, beans, and bread again. This triple starch combination has led both of these two countries to have the fastest growth rate of type 2 diabetes in the world. It's because of all this starch, all this sugar. So you also need to think about the yoga diet and where it came from. India was in starvation. The entire country was starving very, very recently in recent history. This ideal diet was developed during those times to stop starvation. It's not a diet you want to eat to starve. The food that we throw out of helicopters when we're going into an emergency situation is bags of rice and bags of wheat. The food of choice for elite athletes is not bags of white or bags of wheat, nor is it for casual yoga students. It's not the best food. The other thing I'd like to encourage you to do is go look at the modern yoga masters. I don't need to call them out by name, but many of the yoga masters, when they died, the second half of their life, they had enormous bellies. They had type 2 diabetes. And even though they lived well into their 90s, they were clearly in very poor health. And there's documentation of this as well. And so it's not just about lifespan, but also about health span. And if you eat a traditional yoga diet, the path, the trajectory is very, very clear. Again, go back and review our history of modern asana class, and you'll see all of those modern masters from the first, from the 1900s, all of them ended up very, very heavy and very sick by the end of their lives. Avoid pop health silliness. So what does this mean? Well, we have a picture of our friend Dr. Oz here. I don't know if Dr. Oz will still be on television by the time you see this, but Dr. Oz comes on, a very famous medical doctor on TV, and every week he claims something is going to change your life. One week it's raspberry ketones will burn fat off your butt. The next week it's acai berry and goji berries and hypnosis and all kinds of other scams. There is non-stop pop health silliness that just won't do anything. You cannot out-exercise a bad diet long-term. You'll just fail. There's no magic pill to fix all this stuff. It's a holistic practice. It's a holistic path. That's what health is. Green smoothies are not a panacea. There's no Brazilian berry that's going to fix your health problems. Superfoods are great. Dr. Oz has some good superfoods, but they're just not going to do all the health claims that he's saying they will do. So do I need to take supplements? The answer is probably yes. Probably yes. I meet yoga students all the time who say, I don't believe in supplements. And it's such a silly thing to say. If you talk to the World Health Organization, if you talk to any medical doctor, NGOs, nobody's looking for your belief, right? This is not anything supernatural. This is just reality. Vitamin deficiencies are everywhere. There are billions, with a B, billions of people who are iron deficient. There are billions of people, with a B, who are vitamin D deficient. This is not speculation. This is real. There are people in the African continent who are so vitamin A deficient that they're going blind. All they need is a little vitamin A and they don't go blind. There's nothing to believe in or not believe in here. This is just a reality. The sun rises in the morning, the sun sets in the evening, and vitamin and mineral deficiencies are rampant, and this is not a new thing. They have always been this way. When all the archaeological digs, when they pull up people, they find that they have bone disease, they find that they have dental problems. This has been a huge problem since the beginning of time. When you go out into your backyard, chances are you don't see a well-balanced diet growing there. Well, neither did primitive man. We are getting better and better, but we're still vitamin and nutrient deficient. So again, the food that keeps you from starvation, the stuff they throw out of an emergency helicopter when there's a crisis, is very different than the food you want to eat long term. You can eat rice and bread and try to live off that for months or even years or maybe even decades, but eventually the fact that you have no magnesium or no omega-3s is going to catch up to you. So let's take a look. First and foremost, I'd encourage you to go to a doctor and get blood tests. Go in and get blood tests. You can usually get covered by your insurance or by your healthcare service if you have government-provided service. It's a very simple and inexpensive thing to do, and it's something you need to do to understand your health. But the one that most people need is vitamin D. First and foremost, we just don't get enough sun. It just doesn't work. And so 5,000 international units a day is a good place to start. Some people need to take much more. Very few people need to take much less. I feed my kids a lot less than that, of course, but they're small humans. It is something you want to get tested for because it is a hormone, so you don't want to overdo it. I've never met anyone who's overdone it, and I know some crazy people in terms of supplements. So I wouldn't be too worried, but I would go get tested at least every year. Vitamin B12. So it's great for your nervous system health, plant-based people in particular. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan or a raw foodie or a macrobiotic, for sure take B12 every day. Even if you're not, it's probably something you should consider. Magnesium, we talked about this earlier. It's important for muscle relaxation. 400 to 800 milligrams of magnesium citrate before bed might be helpful before bed because it relaxes you, puts you to sleep. It also can stimulate a bowel movement, so that's helpful if it's not in the middle of the day. Sulfur is really important. The preferred form for me anyway is methyl sulfonylmethane. It's called MSM. About 1 to 2 grams per day is a great way to get natural sulfur for your connective tissues. Omega-3s. You want to get triglyceride form CO2 extracted fish oil. That's a big, long phrase qualifier there. So just go ahead and write that down if you're going to go to the store. Triglyceride form CO2 extracted fish oil. Or I like to take algae oil. I'm not a big fan of, well, I don't eat fish at all, but EPA or DHA algae oil. It's much more expensive, but I just like the source a lot better. I think it's the future of omega-3s. So EPA, DHA, algae oil, and again, with either of those, fish or algae oil, 2 to 3 grams daily. All of this stuff, whether we're talking about balance or flexibility or strength or your hormones or your nervous system, how do we put all this stuff into action? The first thing to remember is that small changes that have the big results will motivate you to continue. So if you don't eat fish and you don't eat flax and chia seeds on a daily basis, you're probably omega-3 deficient. Go out and get yourself a fish oil or an algae oil, 2 to 3 grams per day. It's going to make a huge difference. If you've been vegetarian for 10 years and you've been in denial that B12 is a problem, go out and get yourself a B12 supplement. It might just change your life. So sometimes these little changes will have these huge results. It'll motivate you to continue. You'll get excited like a scientist experimenting with your body, creating this positive, virtuous cycle. So focus on the things you can do easily to change first and gradually work toward a place where you're happy with where you're at. It's not about perfection. It's not about giving up all your favorite things. Just find a place where you're happy with where you're at. You feel like your diet, your nutrition is supporting your health goals. Remember, there is no perfect diet. There's no one way of eating that's right for everyone. So just think about this approach as a blueprint, and you can build your own body using it as a rough guide. Key learning here. Yoga puts unique demands on your body, your mind, and your nervous system. There are very few movement modalities, sports, athletics that do the same thing. Gymnastics and dance are close, but yoga is still very different in terms of pushing your joints specifically, in many cases, to their maximum range of motion. Specific foods can make practice easier and help you get optimal results. This is just a reality. Get clear on your goals and make sure your foods support those goals. So again, if your goal is to be an ultramarathoner, well, eat like ultramarathoners. If your goal is to be a bendy-bodied yoga student, eat according to this blueprint and you'll find really great results. Food choices are very personal. Remember that. Some people are vegetarians. Some people are macrobiotic. Some people only eat seafood. Some people never eat seafood. Those are all totally respectable, and we respect diversity, but biochemistry and nutrition science are universal. So whatever belief systems you have, superimpose on that the biochemistry and nutrition of the human body so that you make sure that you're eating to make your life easier. I hope this lesson has been helpful for you. I look forward to your questions, comments, and feedback down below. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.